Chapter 1. The City Under Suspicion. In the heart of gloomy and foggy Noirville, the shadows of the dark streets seemed to whisper forgotten secrets. The constant rain drummed on the windows of Detective Jack Harris's office, a man marked by the scars of time and stories never told. He was sunk in his leather chair, lost in thought, when a subtle noise broke the monotony of the night. It was the sound of something sliding under his door. Jack stood up, his detective instincts sharp. He bent down and picked up a small package wrapped in brown paper.
No sender, no habeas clause.
He carefully tore the paper, revealing an antique pocket watch, its face frozen at 3:15. There was also a letter, handwritten on paper yellowed with age. Revenge is silent but relentless. Discover the perfect crime. The message was cryptic but carried a weight that Jack felt in his soul. Something about that watch and those words stirred a distant memory. He knew that night would bring no rest. Noirville, with its wet streets and dark alleys, was once again about to reveal one of its mysteries. Jack sat at his desk, the sound of the pocket watch echoing in his mind. He flipped through old files, searching for a connection, a clue. That was when he found a case filed exactly 10 years ago. Emily Turner, a young woman whose murder at 3:15 in the morning had never been solved. All the investigators involved had somehow been removed, silenced, as if an invisible hand had swept the case under the rug. What did the watch and the letter have to do with Emily? And who wanted him to discover the perfect crime? Jack felt a chill down his spine, a premonition that he was about to unearth secrets that Noirville preferred to keep buried. With the watch in one hand and the letter in the other, he prepared to dive into the depths of a mystery that promised to be as dark as the city that surrounded him. Chapter 2. The Clock's Enigma. The cold wind swept through the streets of Noirville as Jack Harris left his office, the pocket watch firmly tucked into his coat pocket. The night was dark, with heavy clouds obscuring any trace of the moon. He knew that the path to solving this enigma lay in the dusty archives of the police station, a place where time seemed to have stood still. Upon arriving at the station, Jack was greeted by Sergeant Brown, an old friend who still trusted him. With a silent exchange of glances, Jack was led to the basement where the old files were kept. The dim lights flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Each step echoed through the empty corridor, heightening the sense that something significant was about to unfold. Jack opened the heavy metal door and entered the musty room. He began to rummage through the shelves filled with boxes, his fingers brushing past faded labels until he found what he was looking for, the Emily Turner case file. He took the box and placed it on a metal table, his eyes fixed on the photograph of the young woman. Emily had bright eyes and an innocent smile that contrasted with the tragedy surrounding her. At 3:15, exactly 10 years ago, Emily Turner had been found dead in her apartment. The initial investigation pointed to a robbery gone wrong, but Jack knew something deeper was concealed there. He read the statements of the former investigators, examined the crime scene photos, and found a series of inconsistencies that had never been explained. Jack closed his eyes for a moment, trying to connect the dots. Who would benefit from Emily's death? And why now, after so long, did someone want him investigating again? As he pondered, a soft sound broke his reverie. Footsteps, almost imperceptible, were approaching the basement. He quickly turned off the light and hid behind a shelf. The door creaked open, and a tall, hooded figure entered, holding a flashlight. Jack held his breath, watching the intruder who seemed to be searching for something specific. The man approached the table where Emily's file lay open. Suddenly, Jack leaped from his hiding spot, grabbing the intruder's arm and pressing him against the wall. "Who are you and what do you want with this file?" Jack growled, maintaining a firm grip. The man squirmed, trying to break free, but Jack's strength was unwavering. I'm a friend. I needed to see if you were really investigating the case. We need to talk, but not here." Jack relaxed his grip but kept the man under close watch. "Talk. Who are you?" "My name is Thomas." I was close to Emily. I know things you won't find in the files. If you want answers, meet me at the old warehouse on Baker Street, midnight. And come alone." With that, Thomas broke free and disappeared into the darkness. Jack stood still for a moment, trying to decide whether to trust the stranger. But he knew that to uncover the truth about Emily Turner, he would have to follow every lead, even if it meant delving into more shadows and dangers. Chapter 3. Ghosts of the Past. Midnight approached, and the streets of Noirville were deserted, save for the occasional distant sounds echoing through the alleys. Jack Harris, with his coat pulled tight against the cold, walked along Baker Street, his footsteps echoing on the wet pavement. The old warehouse loomed ahead, a decrepit and abandoned structure, its broken windows and graffiti-covered walls testifying to years of neglect. As he entered the warehouse, Jack was greeted by dancing shadows created by the flickering light of a lantern placed in the center of the vast space. Thomas was there, his face hidden by the hood, but his eyes shone with urgency. "You came," said Thomas, his voice reverberating off the concrete walls. "I'm here." "Now talk," replied Jack, keeping his hand close to his holster, always cautious. Thomas began to speak, his voice a conspiratorial whisper. Emily was about to expose something big, something involving powerful people. But before she could, she was silenced. They killed her and made it look like a common robbery. I tried to tell the police, but I was threatened, forced into hiding. "What exactly was Emily investigating?" Jack asked, trying to stay calm while his heart raced. "She uncovered a web of corruption that stretched from the police department to the most influential businessmen in Noirville. Documents, evidence, she had it all. But someone on the inside leaked the information, and they came after her," Thomas revealed, his voice laden with fear and regret. Before Jack could ask more, the sound of screeching tires announced the arrival of a car. Headlights illuminated the warehouse entrance, and Jack knew immediately they were in danger. "We have to get out of here now," he ordered, pulling Thomas toward a side exit. The two ran through the shadows, the rapid footsteps behind them indicating they were being pursued. They left the warehouse and darted into a narrow alley, weaving through Noirville's labyrinthine streets. Thomas's breathing was heavy, but Jack kept him moving, guiding him through routes only someone who knew the city like the back of his hand could navigate. Finally, they found refuge in an abandoned building, where Jack paused to assess the situation. "We need evidence. Something concrete to bring these guys down," Jack said, panting. Thomas nodded, catching his breath. "I know where to find it." Emily left a copy of the evidence with a friend, a journalist named Sarah. "If we can get to her, we can finally reveal the truth." Jack knew the journey was far from over, but now he had a clear direction. The ghosts of the past were emerging, and he was determined to bring justice for Emily Turner, no matter the cost. Chapter 4. The Web of Corruption. The night's darkness was heavy as Jack and Thomas left the abandoned building, their cautious footsteps echoing through the empty streets of Noirville. They knew every move was risky, every shadow a potential threat. Reaching Sarah, the journalist who held Emily's evidence, was now their top priority. They took an old taxi driven by a driver who asked no questions. Along the way, Jack mentally reviewed the clues he had. Sarah's name had come up in his previous investigations, but he had never connected her to Emily. The car stopped in front of a modest building, its lights off except for a window on the third floor. "Sarah must be up there," Thomas said, pointing to the light. "She works late, always digging for the next big story." Jack nodded, and both got out of the taxi, sneaking into the building. They climbed the creaky stairs, each step a symphony of tension. When they reached Sarah's door, Jack knocked gently. The door opened slowly, revealing a woman with a tired but determined look. "Jack Harris," she said, surprised but not entirely distrustful. "Thomas called me. Come in quickly." Once inside, Sarah led them to a small office cluttered with papers and newspaper clippings. Emily knew she was in danger. "She gave me everything before she died," said Sarah, opening a drawer and pulling out a thick folder. "Here it is. Proof of corruption, money laundering, even contract killings. It all leads to the police chief and some local businessmen." Jack flipped through the documents, each page revealing the depth of the corruption web infesting Noirville. Suddenly, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed up the stairs. Someone was coming, fast. "We're surrounded," Jack muttered, drawing his gun. "Thomas, get Sarah to safety. I'll hold them off." Before Thomas could protest, the door was kicked open, and armed men burst into the small office. Jack opened fire, forcing the intruders to temporarily retreat. "Go now," he shouted, covering Thomas and Sarah's escape. Thomas grabbed Sarah's arm, running towards the emergency exit. Jack, still exchanging gunfire with the attackers, knew he had to buy them time. He backed up slowly, keeping the men at bay, until he heard the emergency door slam shut behind them. Jack finally made his way down the stairs, his heart pounding wildly. As he exited the building, he found Thomas and Sarah hiding in a nearby alley. "We need to move. They'll be after us again soon," Jack said, panting. "Where to now?" Sarah asked, clutching the precious evidence folder to her chest. "We're going to expose these bastards. I know a safe place where we can plan our next steps," Jack replied, as the three of them disappeared into the night's shadows. Chapter 5. The Unlikely Alliance. Darkness still dominated Noirville as Jack, Thomas, and Sarah took refuge in a small café on the outskirts of the city, a discreet place where they hoped to plan their next moves. The café, with its yellowed lights and the comforting aroma of fresh coffee, offered a temporary respite from the tension hanging over them. Sarah, the journalist, had sharp eyes and an indomitable spirit. She had seen much and faced countless dangers, but the determination in her eyes showed she was willing to go all the way for Emily. "These documents are enough to dismantle the corruption network in Noirville," said Sarah, spreading the papers across the table. "But we need more than just evidence. We need a strategy to expose this to the public without getting silenced." Jack nodded, scrutinizing the evidence closely. "We have to be quick and smart. If we try to take this directly to the police, we risk being eliminated before the truth comes out." Thomas, still somewhat shaken from the earlier chase, looked at Sarah. "What do you suggest?" Sarah took a deep breath, as if summoning all the courage she had. "I know an editor at an independent newspaper. He's not easily intimidated and has the resources to ensure this story gets published and protected. But for that, we need to reach him without being followed." Jack realized they were entering a cat-and-mouse game. "We need an escape plan. One they can't predict. Thomas, do you know anyone who can help us with this?" Thomas thought for a moment before responding. "I know an old friend, Lucas. He has experience in clandestine operations and can arrange safe transportation for us." As they planned, the distant sound of sirens and the constant murmur of the city invaded the café, reminding them that time was against them. They decided to split tasks. Sarah would find Lucas, while Jack and Thomas stayed to ensure all the evidence was in order. Hours later, Sarah returned with Lucas, a sturdy man with a determined look. He quickly assessed the situation and devised a plan to get them out of the city undetected. "We'll need 2 cars. The first will be a decoy, the second will take us to a safe location outside Noirville." Executing the plan was full of suspense. Lucas drove the decoy car, drawing the pursuers' attention. Jack, Sarah, and Thomas followed in a discreet car, navigating through secondary routes and avoiding major checkpoints. The tension in the car was palpable. Jack kept his eyes fixed on the road while Sarah constantly checked if they were being followed. Thomas, sitting in the back seat, reviewed the evidence one last time. Every second felt like an eternity. Finally, they reached the safe location, an isolated cabin in the hills outside Noirville. There, they could relax a bit, knowing they had narrowly escaped. Now, the final stage was about to begin, exposing the corruption network that had killed Emily and many others. In the relative safety of the cabin, they gathered around a makeshift table, illuminated by a single flickering lamp. Lucas spoke first, his voice steady and confident. "We've made it this far, but the hard part is just beginning. Sarah, you need to contact your editor and arrange a meeting in a secure place." Sarah nodded, already dialing her editor's number. "I'll set it up. We need to move fast before they regroup." While Sarah made the call, Jack and Thomas went through the evidence again, making sure everything was in order. They knew this was their last chance to ensure justice for Emily and bring down the corruption that plagued Noirville. The meeting with the editor was set for the next morning in a secluded warehouse owned by the newspaper, a place they hoped would be safe enough. They spent the night preparing, knowing that every detail mattered. As dawn broke, they left the cabin, taking a different route to the warehouse. The city was waking up, unaware of the storm brewing beneath its surface. At the warehouse, the editor, a grizzled veteran named Marcus, awaited them with a small team of trusted journalists. Marcus reviewed the evidence, his expression growing graver with each page. "This is explosive," he finally said. "We'll need to corroborate everything, but once we do, this will shake Noirville to its core." Jack, Thomas, and Sarah watched as Marcus's team began their work, contacting sources, verifying documents, and preparing the story. They knew they were still in danger, but the first step had been taken. The truth was out of their hands and into the world, ready to bring justice to Emily Turner and expose the dark heart of Noirville. As the sun rose higher, casting light over the city, they knew their fight was far from over. But they had formed an unlikely alliance, and together they were ready to face whatever came next. Chapter 6. The Perfect Crime. The cabin in the hills was shrouded in an unsettling silence, interrupted only by the distant sound of crickets and the rustling of leaves in the wind. Inside, Jack, Sarah, Thomas, and Lucas gathered around the rustic table, illuminated by a single oil lamp casting dancing shadows on the wooden walls. Lucas, with his serious demeanor and grave voice, began outlining the plan. "We need a distraction big enough to divert their attention from us, but subtle enough not to raise immediate suspicion." Sarah, always the strategist, intervened. "The elite gala in Noirville is tomorrow night. It's the perfect place to expose everything. Most of the involved parties will be there, including the police chief. We need a way to present the evidence without getting caught." Thomas, with a newfound determination, suggested, "We can use the pocket watch as bait. If we place a recorder inside it, we can capture the confessions of the guilty. When the watch is opened, it will trigger the recording live for the audience." Jack nodded. "A perfect trap. But how do we ensure the watch ends up in the right hands and that the recording is broadcast to the public?" Lucas smiled, his experience in clandestine operations shining through. "Leave that to me. I have a contact in the catering service for the event. We can disguise the watch as a gift for the police chief. He won't resist opening it in front of everyone." Tension mounted as the day of the event approached. Sarah prepared the recorder and documents, while Jack and Lucas finalized the operations details. On the night of the event, everyone was ready for the mission. The ballroom was filled with Noirville's influential figures, dressed in luxurious attire, toasting and laughing, unaware of what was about to happen. Lucas, disguised among the waiters, handed the watch to the police chief, who accepted it with an arrogant smile. "A gift from a secret admirer," Lucas said before discreetly withdrawing. Jack and Sarah, hidden in an adjacent room, waited tensely. The seconds dragged on as the police chief, under the watchful eyes of his colleagues, opened the watch. As soon as he did, the recording began to play, Emily's voice echoing through the hall. "If you are hearing this, it means the truth has finally come to light. Here are the proofs of the crimes committed by those who were supposed to protect us." The room plunged into shocked silence, followed by chaos. Powerful figures tried desperately to hide their connections, but the truth was already exposed. Present journalists began filming and broadcasting live, and within minutes, the news spread throughout Noirville. Jack, Sarah, Thomas, and Lucas watched with satisfaction as justice began to unfold. The corruption network was being dismantled before their eyes. The recording continued, detailing the web of deceit and betrayal that had plagued the city. Faces turned pale, and the once jubilant atmosphere turned tense and accusatory. In the ensuing pandemonium, many of the implicated individuals tried to flee, but police officers, some still honest and now seeing the chance to clean their department, moved in to make arrests. The chief of police, realizing he had been outsmarted, stood frozen, the watch still in his hand, unable to comprehend how his empire of lies had crumbled so swiftly. As the night wore on, the hall cleared out, leaving behind only the remnants of Noirville's shattered elite. Jack, Sarah, Thomas, and Lucas slipped out unnoticed, the mission accomplished. They returned to the cabin, a sense of triumph and relief settling over them. Back at the cabin, as the first light of dawn broke, they reflected on their journey. Emily's voice had not only brought justice, but had also united them in a cause greater than themselves. Noirville had a long road to recovery, but the first step had been taken. "We did it," Sarah said, her voice filled with both exhaustion and elation. "Emily's story is finally heard." Jack nodded, his gaze steady. "And we'll continue to fight, as long as there's corruption to uncover and justice to be served." In that quiet moment, they knew their paths were forever intertwined, bound by the shared struggle for truth and justice. The ghosts of the past had been confronted, and a new dawn was rising over Noirville, one where the shadows would no longer hide the sins of the powerful. Chapter 7. The Final Confrontation. The ballroom of Noirville was in a state of controlled chaos. As Emily's recording continued to echo, exposing the depths of corruption that had infected the city, Jack, Sarah, Thomas, and Lucas knew that time was against them. The most powerful figures in Noirville would not stand idly by while their secrets were revealed. "We need to get out of here now," Sarah whispered, her eyes scanning the room for any sign of imminent danger. Lucas nodded, checking the escape route. "The escape plan is still in place. Follow me." As the ballroom buzzed with outrage and confusion, Jack and his group slipped through the shadows, moving quickly towards the exit. However, when they reached the side door, they were met by a group of armed men, henchmen of the police chief, their eyes cold and determined. "Do you think you can escape so easily?" the police chief taunted, emerging from the shadows with a cruel smile. "Did you really think you could expose all this without consequences?" Before anyone could react, Lucas drew his gun, his reflexes honed from years of clandestine operations. "Let us pass, or this will end badly for everyone." The tension in the air was palpable, each second stretching like a taut wire ready to snap. Jack knew that words alone would not get them out of this situation. In a swift motion, he hurled a nearby table at the henchman, creating a momentary distraction. "Run!" Jack shouted, as gunfire echoed through the narrow corridor. Sarah, Thomas, and Lucas sprinted towards the emergency exit, with Jack close behind, covering their retreat. The chase through Noirville's streets began, with the henchmen in hot pursuit. Every corner turned was a new chance for an ambush, every shadow a potential trap. The four of them dashed through the wet, dark streets, the sound of their footsteps blending with the distant wail of sirens. They reached a dead end, but Lucas knew the city better than anyone. "This way," he indicated, pulling open a manhole cover hidden beneath a pile of trash. They quickly descended, finding themselves in the abandoned tunnels running beneath Noirville. "These tunnels will take us out of the city," Lucas explained, leading the way with a flashlight. As they ran through the tunnels, Sarah looked at Jack, her expression a mix of gratitude and determination. "We're almost there, Jack. The truth is finally coming out." Suddenly, a gunshot rang out, ricocheting off the concrete walls. One of the henchmen had managed to follow them. Jack turned, firing back as the others ran ahead. "Go. I'll catch up." The battle in the tunnels was fierce, the sounds amplified by the narrow space. Finally, Jack managed to take down the last pursuer, but not without taking a bullet in his arm. Struggling, he pressed on, finding the others at the tunnel's exit. The night was beginning to give way to dawn as they emerged, wounded but victorious. The city of Noirville, shrouded in a morning mist, was about to wake up to a new reality, one where the truth could no longer be hidden. In the fresh light of dawn, the group made their way to a safe house on the outskirts of the city. Lucas, still alert and cautious, checked their surroundings before letting everyone inside. They sat down, exhausted but relieved, in the modest living room, the weight of their recent escape still heavy on their minds. Sarah began contacting Marcus, the editor, informing him of their safe escape and the additional evidence they had secured. "We need to move quickly," she said, hanging up the phone. "Marcus is ready to publish everything. The public needs to know what we've uncovered." Thomas, tending to Jack's wound, looked up. "This is it. The final push." Jack, wincing as Thomas bandaged his arm, nodded. "We've come too far to stop now. We need to ensure that every piece of evidence reaches Marcus. Once the story is out, they'll have no place to hide." Lucas prepared to return to the city to oversee the final steps of the operation. "I'll coordinate with Marcus and ensure the story is published securely. We'll expose every last one of them." As Lucas left, Jack, Sarah, and Thomas stayed behind to recuperate and plan their next move. The cabin, though a temporary refuge, felt like a sanctuary after the harrowing chase. They knew the danger wasn't entirely over, but the biggest hurdle had been cleared. By midday, the streets of Noirville buzzed with the news. Headlines screamed of the corruption scandal, naming names and detailing the web of deceit. Citizens, outraged and empowered, began demanding justice. The police chief and his associates were swiftly arrested, their empire of corruption crumbling under the weight of undeniable evidence. Jack, Sarah, and Thomas watched the news reports from their safe house, a sense of fulfillment washing over them. The battle had been long and hard fought, but justice had finally prevailed. Sarah turned to Jack and Thomas, her eyes reflecting both relief and determination. "We did it. Emily's story is out there, and Noirville can start to heal." Jack nodded, feeling a rare moment of peace. "We've made a difference. And as long as there are people like Emily, willing to fight for the truth, there's hope." As the sun set over Noirville, casting a golden glow over the city, they knew their fight had made a lasting impact. The ghosts of the past had been confronted, and a new dawn was rising, a dawn where truth and justice would prevail. Chapter 8. Silent Justice. The dawn over Noirville brought an eerie silence. The first light of day revealed a city in transition, still haunted by the secrets exposed the night before. Jack, Sarah, Thomas, and Lucas emerged from the tunnels exhausted, but adrenaline still pulsed through their veins. Sarah picked up her phone and called her contact in the newsroom. "We have all the evidence. We need a special edition now. This can't wait." As she spoke, Jack watched the deserted streets. He knew things wouldn't be that simple. The web of corruption wouldn't fall without a fight. They needed more than evidence. They needed allies and a plan to protect themselves as the truth spread. Lucas, always the strategist, suggested a temporary hideout. "I know a place outside the city, safe and off the radar. Let's head there while Sarah does her work." Hours later, in a secluded chalet in the mountains, the group gathered to watch the live broadcast. Sarah had convinced her editor to publish the story urgently. On the screen, the evidence began to unfold: incriminating documents, recorded confessions, and even videos directly linking the police chief and other bigwigs to the crimes. "Where did you get all this?" Thomas asked, still impressed by the amount of evidence. Emily knew her life was in danger. She was meticulous. "She kept copies of everything with trusted people," Sarah explained. "And now her sacrifice won't be in vain." Suddenly, the news broadcast was interrupted by an emergency alert. The exposed police chief was attempting to flee the city. "They're trying to escape," Jack said, clenching his fists. "We can't let them get away." Lucas grabbed his gun and looked at the others. "We have to intercept them before they cross the border. We know where they're heading." In an old car, the group sped through the winding roads leading to Noirville's outskirts. Every second was crucial. Jack's eyes were fixed on the road, his heart pounding as they approached the escape point. When they spotted the police chief's car, Jack floored the accelerator, forcing them to stop on a deserted bridge. "It's over for you," Jack shouted, getting out of the car with his gun drawn. The police chief's henchmen were ready to fight, but Lucas and Thomas covered them, ensuring no one escaped. The police chief, cornered, raised his hands. "You have no idea what you're doing. This goes far beyond me," he snarled. "Maybe," Jack replied, approaching slowly. "But you'll be the first to fall." As the police finally arrived to arrest those involved, Sarah filmed everything, ensuring there was a record of the capture. The sun was high in the sky when the police chief and his accomplices were taken away, and Noirville breathed a little easier. Back at the chalet, Jack and Sarah sat on the porch, watching the tranquil landscape. "We did it," she said with a tired smile. "But the fight is far from over." Jack nodded. "Justice is a long and winding road. But today we took a big step." Thomas and Lucas toasted their victory with hot coffee, their expressions reflecting a mix of relief and determination. Noirville was beginning to wake up to a new era, one where the truth was finally out in the open.